roar of MotoGP had barely faded at Circuit de la Sarthe when the paddock was hit by a chilling silence. What began as another chaotic sprint race weekend in France suddenly transformed into one of the darkest chapters of Marc Marquez's career. Behind the flashing cameras, screaming fans, and Ducati's growing tension, the reigning world champion was secretly fighting a battle far more brutal than the championship itself. On Sunday morning in Madrid, while the MotoGP world prepared for race day drama, Marc Marquez was lying under surgical lights inside Hospital Ruber International. The Ducati Lenovo team superstar successfully underwent 2 major operations after a devastating high-side crash during the final laps of the French sprint race on Saturday. It was not just another injury. It was a terrifying reminder that Marquez's body continues to carry the scars of years spent dancing on the absolute edge of disaster. The first operation focused on stabilizing a fractured 5th metatarsal in his right foot, a painful injury suffered when Marquez violently crashed out while desperately trying to salvage points at Le Mans. Witnesses inside the Ducati garage described a haunting scene. The number 93 rider returned unable to properly place weight on his right leg, supported by team personnel as concern spread rapidly across the paddock. Moments later, he disappeared into the medical center while rumors of another serious injury exploded across social media. But the real shock came afterward. As doctors prepared the foot surgery, Marquez simultaneously underwent a second operation that had already been planned long before the French GP disaster. Hidden behind Ducati's official statements was a far deeper problem. The nightmare of his right shoulder had returned. Ever since his horrifying crash at the 2025 Indonesian Grand Prix, Marquez had been silently battling increasing pain and nerve complications in the same shoulder that nearly destroyed his career years ago. During the procedure in Madrid, surgeons removed 2 displaced screws and bone fragments left from his previous lateral surgery back in December 2019. According to medical reports, those damaged components had begun pressing against the radial nerve, causing severe discomfort and weakness. Suddenly, the Le Mans crash was no longer the full story. For weeks, Marquez had tried to hide the extent of his suffering. Even after qualifying second at Le Mans with a sensational lap record, the Spaniard made a cryptic confession that now feels almost chilling in hindsight. He admitted that he no longer understood how to ride the bike correctly in his current physical condition. At the time, many believed it was frustration. Now it sounds more like a warning. And yet, despite the pain, despite the damaged shoulder, despite a championship campaign already slipping away, Marquez still pushed beyond the limit in the sprint race. That gamble ended in catastrophe. The crash itself may have lasted only seconds, but its consequences could reshape the entire 2026 title fight. Ducati officially confirmed that Marquez will miss both the French Grand Prix and next weekend's Catalunya round. Doctors will closely monitor his rehabilitation in the coming weeks before deciding when, or even if, he can safely return this season. Inside Ducati, concern is growing fast. The factory team had finally begun showing signs of resurgence, with Alex Marquez dominating in Spain and Francesco Bagnaia taking pole position at Le Mans. But now the spotlight has shifted entirely toward the uncertain future of their reigning champion. The timing could not be worse. Marquez's title defense was already collapsing before France. 2 Grand Prix retirements, 0 Sunday podiums, and inconsistency throughout the opening rounds had left him vulnerable. Even with 2 sprint race victories, he now trails Marco Bezzecchi by 51 points in the championship standings. A massive gap for a rider who entered 2026 carrying the weight of Ducati's expectations. Yet the numbers tell only part of the story. Because beyond the statistics lies the brutal reality of Marc Marquez's career. Every comeback seems to demand another sacrifice, another surgery, another rehabilitation, another painful question about how much more his body can endure. And perhaps that is the biggest plot twist of all. Just when the MotoGP world believed Marquez was finally rebuilding his empire with Ducati, the ghosts of old injuries returned to drag him back into darkness. The king who once looked invincible now faces another uncertain road, not just toward another championship, but toward proving he can still survive the war between speed, pain, and obsession. Inside the Ducati garage at Le Mans, the atmosphere reportedly changed within minutes after the crash. Engineers who had spent the weekend celebrating improved performance suddenly stood frozen in silence as updates from the medical center began arriving. Mechanics avoided eye contact. Team members whispered nervously near the pit wall. For a factory team that had finally started believing in a championship comeback, the accident felt less like a racing incident and more like the beginning of another crisis. What makes the situation even more dramatic is the growing realization that Marc Marquez may have been racing through unbearable pain long before France. Sources close to the paddock revealed that the shoulder problem had increasingly limited his confidence during braking and aggressive direction changes, two riding elements that once defined his terrifying dominance. The rider who built his legend on impossible saves and fearless corner entries was now struggling to trust his own body. And still, he kept fighting. That determination may ultimately become the most dangerous part of the story. Throughout his career, Marc Marquez has repeatedly ignored pain barriers that would stop most athletes. Broken bones, nerve damage, vision issues, multiple surgeries, none of it ever convinced him to slow down. But after the double surgery in Madrid, even some within the MotoGP paddock are beginning to ask the question nobody dared ask before. Has Marquez finally reached the limit? Meanwhile, rivals across the grid now sense a massive shift in the championship battle. Marco Bezzecchi continues gaining momentum with calm consistency, while Francesco Bagnaia appears increasingly comfortable with Ducati's latest evolution. Ironically, just as Ducati finally created a machine capable of dominating the season, the rider many believe could unlock its full potential has been forced back into a hospital bed. For the fans, however, hope refuses to disappear completely. Because if MotoGP history has taught the world anything, it is that writing off Marc Marquez too early is always dangerous. Time after time, he has returned from injuries that seemed career-ending, only to shock the sport once again. But this comeback feels different, darker, more uncertain, and as the championship moves forward without him, one haunting question now hangs over the entire season. When Marc Marquez finally returns, will he still be the same rider who once terrified the world?